This is rental car number 116, and today I'm driving the 2019 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited Sahara 4x4. This one happens to come in bright white. It's a four-door SUV that retails for about $42,000. Real quick, I just want to mention that this is the second ever Wrangler that I've ever driven, and I'm super disappointed that I keep getting these in the middle of winter. I really want a chance to take the doors and the roof off this thing so I can cruise around town a little bit. Anyway, let me get that out of the way. Let's talk specs for a second. This one has a 3.6-liter V6 engine. It's a 24-valve VVT with an 8-speed automatic transmission. Kicks out an impressive 285 horsepower and has a towing capacity of 3,500 pounds. With all that power and might, it gets some pretty good gas mileage for an SUV like this. 17 miles per gallon in the city, 23 on the highway with a 21.5-gallon fuel tank. Gas by me is creeping up kind of slowly. It's the winter of 2019, so I can get gas for about $2.15 a gallon around me. That means if you fill this thing up, by my house at least, you can expect to pay about $47. So I was lucky enough to have this one for about 2 days, and I got some pretty extreme weather during that time. 4 inches of snow, freezing rain, and a lot of ice accumulation all over the roadways. So I got to push this thing through a pretty good test, and I was impressed. Overall drivability is really nice. This is a very stable vehicle. I, however, didn't feel super comfortable going around tight corners, and this might be my own bias because I drive so many sedans, but I felt very high up, and I felt like the car was likely to tip over. Now, it didn't get anywhere near that. I'm just sort of mentioning my own general feeling while I was driving this car. Acceleration-wise, this is also a very decent SUV, but you're definitely not going to be the fastest car on the road. Even in the two-wheel drive setting, well, acceleration it's a lot slower than what I'm used to, but not so much so that I found it annoying. It was just something that I noticed. Last thing I want to mention is cabin noise. Remember, you can take the doors and the roof off of this thing, and even though they're secured very well, you still get a lot of wind sort of whistling through the vehicle at higher speeds. I was driving down the highway at about 65, and I had to crank up the audiobook I was listening to a really extreme volume level just to hear things. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking of driving this vehicle.
Here's the key fob. 3 buttons on the front: unlock, lock, and a panic button. You also get Jeep's logo on the back. Not sure if you can tell, but this is probably one of the largest key fobs I've had in quite some time. There is also a physical key embedded into the key fob. You just press this little silver button up here on the top corner to flip that out. You won't need the key to turn the vehicle on and off, but you will need it to access the hatch in the very rear of the vehicle. To turn the vehicle on, there's a button right here on the dash. Let's push it. You can watch the car boot up. Here's a steering wheel setup. There's a number of buttons here to play around with. On the left-hand side, you get controls to interact with the screen and the gauge cluster. You also get buttons to interact with your cell phone if it's connected via Bluetooth. On the right-hand side, you get your cruise controls, and then wrapped around back, you get additional buttons to adjust the volume. There's similar controls on the right-hand side of the steering wheel that will adjust either the track or the station that you're listening to. Up above, you get a nice gauge cluster with RPMs on the left and a speedometer on the right. There's also a very large and colorful display right in the center. You can cycle through all the screens just by using these buttons right here. There's not a whole lot of fun stuff to look at, although, the off-road features are kind of interesting because you can see at what degree the vehicle is. So if you're tipping to the left, to the right, back, or forward, which is kind of fun to play around with. But I typically keep this screen just on the speedometer settings so I can see how fast I'm going. But, out of the rentals I've had in 2019, this is probably the largest display in the gauge cluster and the most colorful. So that's a pretty nice thing for Jeep to be doing right now. To the left of the steering wheel, we have a number of controls. You have door locks down here, your latch right there, and then controls to adjust the side view mirrors. I kind of think it's interesting that this door lock right here has an icon on it when it locks. So when I unlock the vehicle, this is going to spin and it's going to hide that door lock icon, and then when I lock the vehicle, you're going to see it again. I don't know, it's not that interesting, but it's kind of fun to see cars that handle simple things like this in a slightly different way. As I mentioned before, you have controls to adjust the side view mirrors. Those are pretty standard size. They're a large rectangle. No blindside detection on this vehicle, but you do get a large mirror that makes it fairly easy to see around the vehicle while you're driving. Up on the dash, you also have controls to adjust the headlights and control the brightness of the screens in the vehicle. Up top, you're going to see that things are a little bit sparse up here. You do have controls right here to connect the vehicle to your garage door opener. Everything else is really situated in a way that makes it easy to remove the roof. Now, it's about 15 degrees outside, so I am not going to do this, but I have played around with other Jeeps, and it's not that hard to pop this roof off. It's actually kind of fun to do. Rear view mirror, pretty standard. No buttons of any kind, just your simple toggle switch. Below there, on top of the dash, you have a nice storage cutout with 3 separate areas to keep things. This is pretty much perfect to keep your toll pass or maybe some sunglasses. Below there, you get your center display. This is a touchscreen with a nice color palette, at least in my opinion. Mostly reds, grays, and whites. There's dedicated buttons on the bottom to help you sort of jump to all the important settings on this vehicle. Speaking of settings, I was able to connect my phone via Bluetooth within about 30 seconds, which isn't too bad, and the connection has been solid the last couple of hours that I've been playing around with the vehicle. I just want to quickly mention that there does appear to be some apps on here. I'm never really a fan of this stuff because they never work quite the way I like them to, but it's nice to see that you do have some additional features on the vehicle. We can access the rear view camera with just a touch of a button, which is nice. You can see I'm just in a parking lot, and this is a pretty wide view, which is nice to see. You also get climate controls embedded in this system, so you can adjust the direction the vents are blowing, adjust the fan just by selecting the settings down here, and adjust the temperature of the vehicle. Now, you do also get dedicated climate controls down below, so you can, for example, just turn this knob right here and adjust the fan that way, and you do get nice pop-ups. So if I go to the media tab and I adjust the fan, you'll see that you get a pop-up window right there just showing you how high you're adjusting the fan or how high you're adjusting the temperature of the vehicle. Climate controls work great. I was able to get this car to a pretty comfortable temperature despite the fact that it's about 20 degrees out right now. Big buttons to adjust everything else that's important, and then additional displays below there to control your hazard buttons. Turn on and off the vehicle's ability to turn off the engine when you're stopped temporarily. And then some additional controls for traction control, towing, and you can turn the screen on and off by hitting that button right there. Below there, you get some power ports, right, a 12-volt DC power port right here that you will need an adapter to take advantage of, and some media ports, an auxiliary jack, and 2 USB ports. You also get your window controls right in the center of the vehicle. So these would typically be located on the door, but because the doors of this vehicle actually come off, I'm guessing they put the controls right here. So I just hit the button and you'll notice the window moves up and down. Behind there you get your gear shift. This is wrapped in a nice soft leather. You get a nice Jeep logo right on the top and a red button to adjust the gears. This slides through those gears really smoothly, and you also have a sport mode capability, so you can pop the gear shift over to the left and then shift those gears manually if you so desire. Control next to there switches the vehicle between 2-wheel and 4-wheel drive modes. Works kind of similar to a manual gear shift. You kind of have to give it a little tug and pull, but it works just fine. Old-fashioned handle parking brake right here. And then you have some storage cutouts that are kind of located around everything down here. So 2 cup holders right here, and then you'll notice underneath the parking brake you have a small cutout down here as well. Behind there you have a center armrest wrapped in leather. Oh look, someone left me some trash. What do we got today? Looks like a flash drive, USB 3.0. Nice, someone spent some money. And they left us a receipt too. Awesome. Looks like they kind of broke this whole mechanism too. This is one of those setups where you can, if it worked, hit this button in a certain way and you can, well, you see it kind of worked that time. This top shelf can be controlled so that you can open up the armrest just to reveal the top shelf. Right, or you can suck that in to the top of this armrest so that you can have access to the larger space down below. And it looks like you get a USB connection down there as well, and a pretty sizable storage area if this worked. Look at this. Someone really yanked on this hard. Then over on the passenger side, we have a glove box, kind of small, but there's enough space in there to get your registration, owner's manual, and all that other stuff that you keep typically in your glove box. I brushed past the four-wheel drive controls before because, well, I kind of thought they were self-explanatory. And then, well, I made a really stupid mistake while I was driving. So I want to touch on this really quickly and share my mistake with you. If you haven't noticed, it's pretty horrible outside. We have 4 inches of snow, and now it's raining, so the water is turning into ice on the roads. So while I was driving home tonight, I thought, hey, I'll put it into four-wheel drive. So when I was stopped at a stoplight, I shifted the car into park, and I forced the controls into the 4L position. I didn't know it at the time, but 4L is actually for low speeds when you're going over extremely difficult terrain. It's not for driving in the snow and ice at speeds of 45 to 60 miles an hour. So the car wouldn't move after I did that. I had to throw it in neutral and coast to the side of the road, blocking traffic, and well, feeling pretty embarrassed the whole time. Here's what I've learned now that I've pulled the owner's manual out of the trunk and done a little reading. To properly shift these gears, the best thing to do is to put the car in drive, and you want to coast at about 2 to 3 miles an hour. So really you don't need to give it gas at all. You can just release the brake and move forward. Once you're moving at 2 to 3 miles an hour, you're going to put the car into neutral, and then you're going to be able to manipulate the controls. It takes a little bit of muscle, but now I've put the car into 4H. And that's just four-wheel drive for higher speeds. And then, forgot again, but you gotta shift the car back into drive. I'm such an idiot. And then you can drive the car at four-wheel drive speeds, 4H drive speeds. Once you're in this kind of setting, you can manipulate the four-wheel drive controls at speeds up to about 45 miles an hour. So, ooh, I'm slipping a little bit. It is really slick. So let's do that. I'm not gonna drive 45 miles an hour in a parking lot, but I'm gonna go 10, 12 miles an hour, shift it into neutral, manipulate the controls back into the two-wheel drive position, and now I'm driving a two-wheel drive. And again, I forgot to put it into drive. Put it back into drive, and now we can drive on our way. All right, I jumped in the back seat and I pushed the driver's seat back as far as it would go, just to sort of test out the legroom back here. And despite me being 6 feet tall and this seat being pushed back all the way, I still have maybe an inch and a half between my knees and the back of that front seat, which is a good sign. Speaking of seats, you also get 2 pockets. This is kind of a cloth material, and this doesn't have a lot of give, so you're not going to be able to get a tremendous amount of stuff back here. But there is that storage capability. Let me move my lunch out of the way. You also get another pocket right here on the back of the passenger seat. On the back of the armrest for the front seat, you have 2 dedicated vents right here. Looks like you have controls to adjust the windows. USB ports down here, and one of my favorites, a 3-prong power port right there, so you can plug in pretty much any device you want back here and charge it up. And then there's also 2 cup holders that are kind of situated on the floor of the vehicle. No foldable center armrest on this vehicle, but you do get exposed car seat anchors, so if you do need to connect car seat to this vehicle, it should be fairly easy to do. That's a good sign. Last thing I want to talk about back here is the headrim. You'll notice that you can see the portion of the roof that's removable back here, and the roll cage kind of has a large opening right above your heads back here. So despite me being 6 feet tall and having to sit, with my hips all the way back in the seat because I pushed that front seat back so far, there's still plenty of headroom back here. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting because you do have speakers up here and just more of an interesting roof of the vehicle than you typically get on your average sedan or SUV.
So opening up the hatch of this vehicle is kind of unique. That's because it's in 2 sections. You have to unlock the vehicle using an actual physical key, and then you can open up the bottom section of the hatch, and then lightly, just with your hands, pull up on the glass section and it'll just raise automatically on some hydraulics. Remember, you cannot close the rear section first and then try and close the glass because it'll hit that spare tire and it won't close all the way. Anyway, after you get this thing open, you see that there's some pretty decent storage area back here that you can take advantage of. A large sort of rectangular area. The wheel wells don't infringe on the space at all, and I don't know. Compared to the last Wrangler I had, you have a lot of space back here. It's also nice to see that you can lift up the floor of this area. It's actually built out of a pretty solid material, and you can find a small storage area under here. Also, on the side, the left side of the vehicle, there's also a DC power port right here for you to take advantage of. The rear seats also fold down really easily, by the way, just by pulling on these plastic latches on the top of the seats. Seats fold down without any effort on your part, and then you reveal an even larger storage space. And this is comparable to any of the larger SUVs I've driven lately. It really is a large area that you can probably take full advantage of if you're trying to haul larger items. Alright, so that's pretty much everything end to end on the 2019 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited Sahara 4x4. I really like this car. I would gladly drive it again, especially if it's a little bit warmer out, because I would love to take the top off this thing and see what it's like to drive around in a pseudo-convertible. But I'll admit, my knowledge of this vehicle is not great. This is only the second one I've ever driven, so if you think I missed something or you want to point out maybe a fun feature that you know about that I missed, please let me know in the comments below. I honestly would love to hear from you. Criticism is always appreciated. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time when I rent and review my 117th rental car. I'll see you then.